Hey, good morning, everyone. It's Brenda Meller with Meller Marketing, bringing you back for another slice of social media pie. This is my live interview series where I bring on inspiring people to inform and educate you. And before we get started with our welcoming our guests, I want to just welcome our audience, those of you who are watching, whether you're watching this live or in playback on LinkedIn, on Facebook, or on YouTube. I would love it if you could please drop a comment below. This helps me to know that the live feed is picking up, because I want to make sure that my very special guest, Marc LeDuc, knows that people are watching. So, Marc, how are you doing this morning?
Oh, I've had a pretty rough morning. And how about yourself?
Doing okay. You've had a rough morning. Is this going to be part of our story today as we talk about computer, the impact on our kids?
Oh, you betcha.
Good fodder for the conversation. Well, let's hold off on that thought. And I see we have one comment coming in. Suraj, thank you so much, sir. Appreciate you commenting. And when you guys comment, it lets us know that the live feed is working. So please comment. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. We have Stephen watching us on the West Coast. Gosh, really early in the morning for you, Stephen. So thank you so much for watching. Well, we're going to jump into the conversation here in just a few moments. But before we do so, I want to tell you guys how I know Marc. And Marc, I did a training with your team. Gosh, it was about a year ago, I think. It was a LinkedIn team training, and it was down in Pittsburgh.
Yep.
It was a year ago, wasn't it? I think it was
a little
February.
2019.
Yeah,
COVID,
and I've been following you since then. You've been doing a good job. I'm a very proud teacher because you've been such a great student with it. Why don't you, if you could take a few minutes, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. And again, thank you. That LinkedIn training, for those who haven't done it, was excellent. Really, our organization, I work for SAE International, which was founded by Henry Ford, the Wright brothers, and several other prominent OEMs. And the intent was to convene subject matter experts on vehicle development. So my job, which really is, I think, one of the coolest ones, is to convene the brightest minds in the automotive industry on developing that next generation of mobility. And one of the things that I talked to you about offline was the fact that I think people underestimate the value of what goes on in mobility and the engineers that create the vehicle. If you start to look at 100 million lines of code that go into a car, and for all the safety features that we have that we pretty much take for granted until we need them, such as automatic emergency braking, things of that nature. So I really have the joy of researching and finding those folks that are doing really brilliant work in mobility and bringing them to a conference center or a hotel and having them share their insights. So regretfully, we've been hit pretty hard with COVID because you can't convene people face to face. So, but to that point, we really used your LinkedIn training really well.
Perfect timing then, right?
Yeah, it was really, because LinkedIn has been the great equalizer in trying to reach out to people. And then we are now connecting to them to bring them to, because we now have to do everything digitally. So it's been
virtual. And did you guys change like right away into virtual last year? I mean, it was like probably March when everything kind of just stopped happening. I mean, how soon did you shuttle into or kind of convert into virtual events from that?
Well, we did in 8 weeks. We pivoted our largest event, which is coming up, WCX, in 2 weeks. We pivoted that event last year in 8 weeks to a fully digital format. So we went into the deep end of the pool with weights on and everything. So
wow. Well, great. Well, it's fortuitous that everything happened in the time frame that it did when we met and we did our training. And glad that we've stayed connected. Like I said, I've been very proud of your efforts over the past year. We've remained in contact, and I think I reached out to you a while back and I said, hey, do you want to come on my live show sometime? And we were kind of kicking around, what do we want to talk about? And I know, the mobility industry, and we're like, well, I don't know, is it going to draw people out? I said, just pick something that you're passionate about. Let's talk about that instead. And you said, hey, let's talk about computers and the impact on our kids. So let's jump into the conversation. And to kick us off, I have I'm watching the comments and I'm laughing because Dan Roth just left a comment. He's home with 2 little ones. He's
nice.
Watching from the ground because the toddler just kicked him off of his own bed. We feel you, Dan.
Oh, goodness. That and the dogs. I usually lose my space to the dogs.
So let's jump in. Why did you pick this as a topic? Why is this important to you?
Sure. Well, I started to see a little bit of behavioral changes in both of my boys once COVID started hitting, and we had to pivot. Here in Michigan, we all pivoted to the digital platform. And all of a sudden, I started noticing that my kids were becoming more and more involved in social media, the computer, because that was their life. It still is 24 hours a day. They go on school, they sit on a classroom and then all of a sudden, they can't connect face to face. So they ended up trying to use Snapchat and TikTok and all of those other things, which, by the way, I still thought vegetables were vegetables. I didn't realize that vegetable emojis were for other things. Apparently, there's a whole thing about peaches and eggplants and things that I don't understand, which, again, I guess that means the gray beard makes me old.
Now I'm going to have to go ask my son, he's a teenager too, he's 16. Sure. I'll have to ask him what the different vegetables and peaches and thing. He'll probably be rolling his eyes at me. How old are your kids, Mark, if you don't mind?
I have a soon-to-be teenage son, and I have one that is 15 doing driving, just like your son. So both of us, God help anybody on the road. Our sons are out on the road.
They're learning though, and they're under our guidance, right, Mark? So we'll be okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm taking them up north, so no one has to panic. We're doing a lot of driving up north. No, what it was, I was noticing that more and more of this is, I started looking at the social dilemma, that movie, and looking at, I'm a researcher to find these experts. So I started researching on what was going on in the world around social media and computers and what I'll call addictive behaviors. And so, unfortunately, COVID has exponentially driven that up, really, and looking at the amount of hours. There's a great doctor out of Brown University, Dr. Nisi, and wrote a really interesting article for North Carolina University on the impact of social media on youth's mental health. And you can see this precipitous decline in mental health with a lot of use of social media because of that instant need for gratification, the young malleable brain, those sort of things. And so that's really where, for me, I'm in the soup, if you will, of dealing with the young minds and trying to make sure that there's a good balance between actively using technology, but not in a situation where it's an addictive need for social technology.
And are your kids virtual with their school right now, Mark, or are they back in person? Where are you guys at?
Yeah, we just, it's funny. You and I are not far apart from each other in Michigan. We have a completely different take on school systems. We just got back full time last week, and we've been on and off. For the most part, we've been doing it virtually. So both of my sons are also athletes, so they're very, and I think that's the part was team activities and teammates and things like that, that all of a sudden in March last year, they had their tournaments they were going to that all got pulled, and that made them very depressed about not having that. And then they were supposed to take the athletics in the fall, and then that got pushed back, and they were going to do it. Then it got pushed back. So all of a sudden you can see these minds of athletes that now are by very nature team oriented and very social, to all of a sudden you've now said the only way you can look at them is like what you and I are doing on the screen.
And it's hard because you and I as adults, we can manage, it's hard not to be able to go out with my friends and go grab a dinner, have a brunch or something like that, but we can manage. And for the kids, this is their livelihood. This is they're growing up right now. They're being around their friends. Socialization is an important element. But as a parent, you and I both know you're torn because you want to keep them safe from a health perspective, but psychologically, like, how damaging is this to not be around people, right? And it's hard.
I think the long-term effect is going to be something that, like Dr. Nisi and others that are going to be studying. I went in, they're already looking at it in Japan and Italy, all over the world. I've been looking at, I got lots of research. So if you go on to this thing of social media, computers and youth mental health, because again, it's very much like it's an endorphin rush, right? The instant likes, the AI systems that they have created, which are very much this, I have to know exactly what my friends think every second of every minute. And then that is notifications, pop-up notifications. That is this whole, it's just a chemical rush. It's like, and I hate to use the term, but it is a drug. It is a drug for cocaine. All of a sudden, like, ping, I got to turn. When is your son? I got to ask the question, and I'm not saying, when was the last time your son didn't have a phone in his hand, right? Does he walk around with it in his pocket or in his hand all the time?
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And
probably like when he's in the shower, or when
yeah,
he realistically, when he's in the car, I make him, he puts it inside the glove box and we close it.
yep,
And I'm trying to get him to train to do, to not have the phone anywhere where there's any temptation. But I agree. I don't remember when he got his first phone. My son's 16, my daughter's 9. So it was somewhere in there when she was little, but I think I was distracted and my husband gave him my phone to my son. And I looked up one day, I'm like, wait, he has a phone? Like, how did he get a phone? I don't remember this
yeah,
discussion, but, and then she, we waited as long as we could, but it got to the point where she's going to be at a friend's house and I want her to be able to text us,
sure,
because you rely on that technology now. You don't say call us, you say text us.
right, right.
No, it's hard. And as a parent, you want them to have technology, but I think you and I both want them to be empowered to make smart choices, but they're kids too.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, and their brains, most people don't realize that your brain continues to grow until you're about 23.
Mm-hmm.
Most people think like, holy smokes. And some of us never grow up, but that's a totally different issue that we'll talk at another time. But, so this idea that this brain is growing and that you're now creating a whole synaptic response system that is different than it was originally designed for with this whole computer. And then you have in the background, I find it funny is that there are social media when if you watch the movie, I don't know if you've seen Social Dilemma or not.
I've not been holding off because I'm hearing horror stories about it. Did you watch it though?
Yeah, absolutely. I made my son watch it. And what was fascinating to me is that even though he watched it and he knew that it was bad, he still wasn't going to change his behavior. And I thought that was really, and my wife was mortified about it. And she started turning off notifications because people just don't realize that AI algorithm that they put in to constantly create the need for pop-up ads and notifications. And if you're not on the computer long enough, you ever notice that your computer your phone will tell you, hey, it's been a while since you've been on, what's going on? They actually now are, so they're creating all this. And as you talk about, you and I hopefully are mature enough that we can handle putting the phone down and stepping away. Right. But that brain that is constantly trying to make new decisions and make the right decisions struggles pretty mightily with this idea that, and don't get me wrong, I think the computer and what they've had to do for school is a yeoman's job. And it's
thankfully we're in the year that we're in and this is happening. Not that we wish the pandemic upon anybody in any year, but thankfully we're in a day and age where we have technology, where we can communicate, where we can do virtual learning, because what if it was 20 years ago? What will we do that,
Right. Well, yeah, again, you'd look at it and try to figure all of this out. My thing is, I just noticed that with these behaviors, and you start to look at the science of it, all of a sudden you get a lot more microaggressions. You get a lot more of the social isolation. I listened to your broadcast last week, and you were talking about how your son is actually coming out of his room.
Yes.
Mine are doing just the opposite. Mine have now gone from really outdoorsy social kids where we've said to them, wear a mask all the time. Don't go near anybody.
Right.
COVID. So they slowly started to contract, and pretty soon their safe space is their bedroom now.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, we're still trying to you do dinner. So I'm still trying to do one dinner a week where everybody sits down at the table without electronics.
No devices. We have that rule at our house, wherever we are, even if we're sitting in the living room, if we're sitting next to somebody else dining, there's no devices. You have to put it away or flip it over. And I'm trying to teach them, you got to learn how to at least talk to people while you're eating. Like that's a basic thing that you got to learn. And even though they roll their eyes and they scoff, they're used to it now, and they sit down and they flip their phone over or they put it across on the other side of the table. So they're getting good at it.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because even television shows that are going on are having this whole thing where they're trying to put all of the phones in the basket for dinner and trying to make a real social comment about the fact that, you and I grow up, and I think going forward, I think this COVID, I'll call them the COVID generation, boys our age and younger, are looking at it from the standpoint of, the social interaction now for a year has just been on these devices, and there's no filter to it. I can say anything I want without repercussion. And I think that we've seen as adults, we haven't mirrored very well the behavior of how we should be on social media. So the question is, how do kids actually mirror us. And I think that's an interesting thing to talk about is, you know, how we do Facebook and all of these other passive aggressive things that we have no recourse for. No one's going to come over. You wouldn't have said that to the person, not you personally. You wouldn't have said it to their face, right? But it's really easy when you're on this to just get all that stuff out and say whatever you want without recourse. And I think that is with COVID and all of these things, that there's a small group of people that are really anxious, they're depressed, they're feeling isolated, they've gone to this device. And I realize, you know, they said that about our generation in television, right? That we were
right.
And television was going to be the worst thing in the world for us. And maybe that is or isn't true now. But I think that this AI is really the thing that's alarming me on what's going on with social media.
So you were talking about notifications earlier, and I have my notifications shut off on my phone because I just can't, you know, if I had my LinkedIn notification, I'd be like, it'd be ringing like a bell the whole time we're going in here. And I just can't do that. Do you have your boys on their, do you talk to them about shutting off notifications? Or do they have them shut off on their phones too?
Oh, well, I don't know about girls. I just have the 2 boys. So I can tell you boys are fun and sneaky. No matter what you do, it's like a criminal. They're always trying to stay one step ahead of you, right?
It is.
Yeah, it is. It's this really fun game as a parent, right? You're tracking your kids to make sure that they're not going onto certain websites. You do certain things. You want to let them have freedom. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, we're going to turn all the notifications off. Well, then all of a sudden they realize that you've turned off the notifications, and then they figure out a backdoor way to turn the notifications back on. So every night is this balancing act of them understanding, because again, they are not talking with kids enough. They're not, even at school, our kids are like, the teachers go in and out of the classrooms. The kids never leave their seats.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you're not, you know, maybe at lunch you get a little socialization, but it's still, you've just changed the environment from your couch or your kitchen. You know, I sent you a photo of what my office looks like. I thought it was hysterical last week, that kid on the 2-year-old, the toddler on the table.
Yeah.
I'm working on a plastic craft table. I've been working for 12 months on a plastic 30-inch craft table with, you saw the picture, with the monitor and the boys dropping little trinkets off. So I feel like I'm doing something fun at home, you know. But yeah, it's a tough balance, honestly, going back to your question. So
yeah. And you know, what's interesting too is even for the schools that have returned in person, I was talking to my son about this, because for the beginning part of his school year, it was all virtual. And then in January, they moved back to in person, but it was reduced class sizes. And, you know, they made the modifications. The kids in his school, they do move around, but there's certain class sizes and, you know, restrictions they have. And I was talking to him one day, and he's, you know, he was miserable being at home virtual. And then he's like, I hate being back at school. And I said, well, would you rather be virtual? And he said, yeah. And I said, but you said you hated it. Isn't it at least nice being around other kids? He's like, Mom, we don't talk. And I go, what do you mean you don't talk? He's like, we're all wearing masks. So that creates like a barrier that you feel like you don't want to talk because it's covering you. And we can't hang out in the hallways. They won't let us hang out together in the hallways. And even like the bathrooms doors are locked during breaks. You have to get a hall pass during class to go into the bathroom. So that's a socialization place. They don't socialize in there anymore. And he's like, when we get into class, he's like, everybody's just like so worried about all this stuff. We just sit on our devices and we're looking down at our phones. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that. So, you know, I mean, it's hard. And we're here talking today, guys, about computers and the impact on our kids. And there was this pre-COVID impact that's now during COVID, the pandemic, you know, it's kind of shifted us to a new place. I mean, Mark, I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm learning every day.
Oh, no doubt. It's one of these situations that the conversation you had was the last week. Again, I keep referring to that because I think it's a great one-two conversation here. It's about parenting in a coronavirus. And I call it assimilation. I think of it's work-life assimilation. I don't call it integration. I don't call it a balance. I've had to learn to go back to school. I had to go back and learn Common Core math, which what the heck is Common
Core? No, I'm resisting it. But the thing I like is the teachers say there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can do the Common Core, you can do the traditional. And I'm like, okay, I can't relearn at this point. And my daughter keeps trying to explain with the grids. And I'm like, what are you doing?
I'm watching my kids do this all the time. And I'm like, what are you doing? They're like, I'm doing math. And I'm like, You and I just did 7 times 6 is this, 6 times 6 is this, 6 times 5 is this. They now have to have all the logic. They have to work all the way through to the bottom. And I'm like, can't we just get to that bottom right there? That's what I want. And again, it's everything Common Core. Then you look at how biology is done and how English is done, how history is done. We've gotten all of these. Not that it's better or worse. It's just so different.
Different ways of teaching, and you have to believe the education system is evolving as the needs are evolving. And my son, he's in that phase too, where Mark, he doesn't like going to school anymore. And he's like, I don't really want to go to college. I'm not going to push him if he's not going to want to, but I'm like, you got to figure out what you want to do. But, he and I get into discussions nowadays about where the education system is, I don't want to say broken, but where he thinks there's issues. He's like, why are they teaching? And I remember, you probably remember too, Mark, in high school, why are they teaching us these things? We're never going to use these. I mean, he's getting to the sense where he's rationalizing what he is learning. But I appreciate the fact that he's thinking through. And I'm like, well, it's teaching you how to think. It's teaching you to challenge yourself. And he's like, but it's pointless. And I'm like, well, we get into these good discussions.
Oh gosh, are you sure you haven't been over to my house? Because that sounds an awful lot like the same guy. Yeah, my son's looking at the military as my oldest there as his, not college first, but looking at military, making a decision, which I think is a great consideration. Because again, I talked to mom, like when I got 18, I was really kind of swimming. I didn't know where I wanted to go.
Right. Yeah. How do you know? How does anybody know what they want to be when they grow up? Right.
I'm still waiting to grow up myself, to figure out what I'm going to do. But yeah, we've had that conversation. And I think that, again, I have my brother and his wife are both teachers, and it's a horrible job to have to do right now. And I don't argue that at all. And you look at these policies that we put in place, you don't have to put your camera on. Who wants to teach to 23 black screens, right?
Screens. Oh my God.
The screens of death. How can you be inspiring to do that? We make our kids, our boys, turn on their screen. They're like, but I don't like this. I'm like, I don't care. You need some energy back. Otherwise, how can, and sitting, you and I don't like to sit in front of a computer just listening.
No. But and I think we talked about this too, the fact that some school districts are doing that because of there's differences in homes. I mean, there's some upper class homes, there's some lower class, and some kids are feeling like by showing the background, they're they don't want to show their homes, they don't want to show their bedroom, they don't want to show their living room. I mean, and that's fair. It's a personal, private place,
right? So,
and it's infringing upon their privacy. So I think the administrators have made the decision you can't require it. And the beginning part of the year, our son, he would have his camera, and I walk in the room, and there's like literally the sea of black screen with the teacher talking at the top. And in the beginning of the school year, the first day of school when they had virtual, it was everybody's name was on camera, and everybody could chat with each other.
Right.
And then and these kids hadn't been around each other all summer because of the pandemic. So of course, what happens day one? You put a bunch of kids in a video room where everybody can see each other and everybody can chat with each other. Well, they're going to be kids, because that's what kids do. Yeah. And they're excited to see people, and they're chatting, and then the inappropriate teen, nothing crazy, but they're teenagers, kids. And the inappropriate stuff started. And then at the end of day one of school, I got a note from the teacher that my son was involved in an inappropriate discussion. and I asked her to send me the transcript. And it like somebody had asked a question and my son said no. That was his contribution. And the question was about an inappropriate site. But it was like, these are kids. And I'm like, can't you give the kids a break? So day 2, or maybe it was day 3, they implemented the system where the kids could not communicate with each other anymore. And then the screens only said user 1, user 2, user 3.
Yeah. And again, you talk about homogenized training, and you talk about these things. And again, let's be honest, I jokingly say that they're, your son dresses like my son, which I jokingly refer to as the Unabomber look, right? It's big, heavy sweatshirt, put the hoodie over it. Yeah. They get it tight like this, and, and they're walking around. I'm like, what's going on? It's not that cold in the house, right?
All year long too, even in the summer, Mark.
Oh, no doubt. Sweatpants and like sweats are the new khaki, right? That's my joke in my house. I got I got thousands of sweatpants all over the place. Boys, girls, it doesn't matter. Hoodies, sweats. So yeah. But let's be honest, they're smart enough that they're chatting anyways. They're doing it through Snapchat.
Well, right? That's as soon as the teachers banned chat on the computer, they all just went on their phones.
Right.
I mean,
And
they're not
and
going to
then
not
you've
laugh
lost
at each
them.
other.
Yeah. You've completely lost them at that point.
Yeah.
I sit with and watch my son on both of them with their screens so that I can see and walk by. And it's this constant tag of what do I see on the screen? What don't I get to see on the screen? Because my boys
Yeah.
are quick with the switch on the
Oh
screen.
yeah, you can always tell too, right? Like
Yeah.
when their eyes kind of shift sideways when you walk in the room, like what
Or
were you
all of a sudden the color on their face changes because they went from a website of super bright to school.
Yeah.
And so it is, and miraculously that they're even getting to where they're getting. And again, I give teachers great kudos for that. But I'm spending all my time on that Borg integration, as I call it, the simulation, is that now I am sitting there becoming like, soon as they get done with class, let's do the homework. And they're just miles and miles and miles of homework, and trying as a parent on a computer to understand all of the platforms, from Canvas to all of these other platforms. The kids have to take a test over here. They have to do a test over here. Then they give you this thing that, you get a login, and then you have to track your kids to see how well they're doing. And then all of a sudden you're like, you're 42 assignments behind. How did that happen? Well, that's not true, Dad, because I turned it in, but the teacher hasn't graded it. So now this instantaneous feedback that you're looking at, because the computer is a great device, but now all of a sudden it's created this tension in my family, at least, of what was turned in, what isn't turned in. But I have instantaneous, up to the minute, which for me as an OCD person, not the coolest thing in the world to give me that, well, that wasn't turned in 5 minutes ago. I'm constantly, so you have to, even for myself, check back a little bit. But yeah, it is. And that's this constant barrage of technology that forces instantaneousness. So I think that COVID is really, this is my whole concern for this next generation, is what are their social skills, right? Because there's no filter on that. My son's a freshman. He walked in to school, COVID, virtually, and he's not learned how to deal with a big school, not dealing with all of those new kids, all of that. Now he's into this little, even in middle school, it's the same thing. They're not being able to socialize like your son was talking about. They all go back onto this. They're talking to each other. What was cute a couple of years ago about the joke about the little boy and little girl who were sitting on the couch texting each other but not talking is become alarming to me, is this whole idea that there's no social interactivity. So I think that as parents and as researchers, we really need to take a look, even politicians, and I don't want to get political, is we really need to take a look at this balance between where social isolation, I mean, you torture somebody by putting them in isolation, right? Let's be honest, that's one form of torture, is to put them in isolation. And even worse is put them in isolation, but give them the opportunity to ping out to the outside world, right? But still not be able to interact with the outside world. So I think that for me personally, I think we are just at the precipice of what could be from the mental health industry. We talk about it all the time, right? And I think that this generation of my kids, your kids, we're going to have to really be vigilant on having that open conversation and saying, how are you feeling? It's okay. That we've always, at least when I was younger, you didn't talk about being depressed or anxious or anything like that. It was still a stigma. But I think going forward, I think this is going to be something between the addictions and the anxiety and microaggressions and all of these things. That's something that we're really going to have to look at. And regretfully, when I was at the Board of Education meeting, there were hundreds of parents, and probably half of them were talking about how their kids' behavior has become so.
It was a virtual meeting, I'm assuming, right?
Exactly. That was the irony of the whole thing. And they had little kids coming on and saying, look, I want to go back to school. I miss seeing people. And then they had all of these parents who were in tears talking about, my young, fun, vibrant kid has become very aggressive because there's nothing for them to do. I'm at home. I'm trying to work, that assimilation. I'm trying to work. I can hear in the background right now my boys. Fortunately, it's spring break, so I'm not having to yell at them about making sure that they're.
Are they up? Wow, that's a shock. Like for this is like crack at 9:30 in the morning. They're up already?
Well, that was the thing. That's why I was telling you I had such a lovely morning, because it was garbage day here at the household, and certain tasks and responsibilities were not done, and the garbage came at 7 a.m. And so all of a sudden I was sleeping like a baby till all of a sudden, boom, and in the house, you know. So, you know, that was, you know. And I think the other thing is that Wi-Fi is ubiquitous now, right?
Yeah.
No, you know, and that was the other part of schooling that you and I were talking about, is some places like in Pontiac, not every house has Wi-Fi.
Yeah, right.
They have access to a phone, the vast majority of them, but no Wi-Fi. And so again, that's a learning thing. But for those who have it, I don't know about you, I've tripled my bandwidth at home.
Oh, we had to. I think there was one day where we were all, and it was when the kids were all virtual in our area, where we, you know, I'm a home-based business, so I've been working from home before this, but then my husband was home, and then my son was, and it was like the one day we were all pulling on at the same time. We're like, oh, we got to upgrade. Yeah, it's been a learning.
Oh yeah, I tripled mine, and it was all of a sudden it was, wow. Then all of a sudden I started paying X amount of dollars for my bill, just went whoa way up here.
Right.
It made me, yeah, I sit there. But again, kids think it's ubiquitous, right? There's no fee for Wi-Fi. I don't know what you're talking about. Wi-Fi, everywhere I go, Wi-Fi is free. I don't know about you. I've had to have that conversation. Wi-Fi isn't free, kids.
Right. Neither is your phone, by the way. There's a phone bill that's being paid, and the phone is a privilege. We've had many of those conversations. The phone is a privilege. Technically, the phone is mine because I pay the bill. It's not your phone. No, it's not. No, it's your phone. When you start paying the bill, then it's your phone. Until then, it's my phone.
Oh, no doubt. We didn't, you know, most people gift a phone to their kids. We didn't. We made that decision. And I jokingly say we're the worst parents in the world, by the way. You're looking at the single worst parent right here. This is it. The stinkiest dad in the entire world you're looking at. Your husband's not it. I'm it. I'm the worst dad. Because, again, we're like, okay, 10 o'clock, wife, shutting the devices down. You got to go to bed. You got to have a certain amount of sleep. You're the worst parent ever. No parent does this, Dad.
No, but you got to set boundaries. And I mean, your kids will be better for it, even though they don't see it that way right now. And, you know, hey, Mark, I want to start to invite our audience. If you guys want to contribute to the conversation, maybe some of the topics Mark and I are talking about are kind of piquing your own struggles, challenges, whatnot. And one thing I was thinking of, Mark, is, you know, we had the pre-technology conversations, you know, before the pandemic, and now, you know, it's layering on in different areas. And I wonder if, you know, the fact that we've been through a pandemic all together where we haven't been able to see each other in person, once everything settles down and we're back to the normal of the land of the living where we can be outside and without a mask again, I wonder if the devices, I mean, I think they're going to still be around, but I wonder if the kids are going to put them down and go, I should talk to these people in person. And like, I wonder if we're going to see the boomerang effect happening, where now that you can see people in person, they're going to want to not be on the phones as much because they can interact. I'm hopeful, at least. I don't know. What do you think, Mark?
I think the horses left the barn, honestly. And I think that now children, at least what I'm watching is children, you know, if they're within 6 feet, because we were fortunate enough, we got in our sport. My sons are both wrestlers. So we got in a season of wrestling. But it was one of these things where half of the kids were sitting together on their device, right? And other kids were talking about. So again, I think it goes to the very mental makeup of children. And I think that for some of them, we're going to be in great shape. But I think those that are maybe have ADHD and some of these other disorders, and I don't like to use the term disorder, but just learning abilities that are different and how their brain processes things. I think for those kids, it's going to be a very long slog, because I think overall, you know, you've seen the adults that are still, they're sitting there on, the adults that are like that. There's just a certain chemical in the brain of some people that are going to make them more prone to that. But I honestly, you know, I'm cynical. I have gallows humor 100% of the way. I am really cynical. I don't have social media, by the way, other than LinkedIn. No Snapchat. I don't do TikTok. I don't do any of it, because I sit there and watch people spend hours on this stuff, and I go, really? You're watching somebody put a bikini on a dachshund and dancing, and you just are just amused by that for hours?
That's what they do. They watch YouTube my daughter this morning, before she got onto her school, she was watching YouTube videos, and there's YouTube celebrities, there's families that this is what they do for a living. It's just amazing, you know. I'm seeing a couple of questions coming in. I'm going to pop the first one up on screen. With the disclaimer that Mark and I are not experts on children nor technology.
We use it a lot.
So we use it a lot. These are 2 points of views. And I'm curious, Mark, what do you think is the youngest age would be acceptable in your point of view for giving a child their own cell phone?
18.
But having said that, when did you give your sons, when did they get a cell phone?
Okay. And again, I am the worst parent in the world. So just so that you all know, they do not own their own cell phones. They do not have their own devices. They have devices that we bought that they have access to. So it is not their phone. We never gifted them a phone. We made a real cognizant decision to do that. Okay. I will tell you what was interesting was my youngest, or actually it was my oldest, when he started to try to touch the television to get the TV to do the things that the tablet did. Yeah. That's when I knew that we were in a whole different world of learning and how kids learn. And so my answer is, personally, is that it's not about giving them the phone. It's when do you give them access and what restrictions do you have in that access of use? So again, my son is being shamed for not having his own phone. I'll be honest with you about it. They're like, what do you mean you don't have your own phone? No, this is my mom and dad let me use a phone. Well, they get shamed for not having their own phone, and they get shamed if they don't have the S11 or the whatever, the 11S. Or
what's the new one? Yeah.
I mean, he's got an 8 and he's ostracized for having an 8, right? That's the world that they live in. And again, that was just like us in shoes, right? If we didn't have Jordashes, that's how old I am. If we didn't have Jordache jeans, you know, if you wore Levi's, you were just a hick, right? And if you didn't have the right tennis shoes, but so I get it. So that's my personal answer. When did you do the decision for you and your kids?
Like I said, my son, I don't remember. I mean, we had my daughter when my son was 6, so it was probably around 7 or 8 when my husband, I think he got a new phone and then gave my son his phone. And I don't remember the conversation. I just remember looking up one day and he had a phone, but it was for playing games, and he wasn't texting anybody or anything at that point. My daughter, we gave her a phone this past year, and it was really, I mean, I was resisting as long as we could, but it was really because of the fact that she couldn't see any of her friends. And the only way she was communicating was with chatting with them was through the phone. And when I wasn't on a call, she was using my phone. And when my husband went on a call, she was using his phone. And it got to the point where I needed my work phone, he needed his work phone, and it was the psychological, well, she's got to have some socialization with her friends.
Right.
So we broke down and got her a phone, and we have a lot of rules, you know, and we check her phone periodically, and she knows never to answer a call from people she doesn't know. But I mean, I think every family's got to figure it out for themselves. I remember when she was in elementary school, I think it was in 1st grade. I remember there was a girl in her line who had a phone, and the phone kept falling out of her jacket on the ground. And I'm like, I just felt like 1st grade, that's way too young to have a phone. But I also, like, you know, she's like, well, my mom wants me to be able to text her if I'm ever worried at school. And that's a whole other thing, you know, all the happened in schools lately. You know, I don't know. There's so many layers of that. Nancy, I don't know if we know, I'm curious if others that are watching right now, what's the youngest age? I think for us, it was kind of responsibility. But also it was the socialization, psychological aspect for us. We needed her to have contact with her friends. But as a parent, I think, Mark, you're not wrong. I'm not right. There's not a right or wrong. It's like whatever works best with your family, right?
No doubt. And then you start to look at pediatricians and they talk about that, you know, traditionally like 12 or something is that, you know, kind of that age. But I'll encourage the other side of this coin that I've been dissing so much is I think technology is phenomenal. I think what's going on in technology is phenomenal. You know, what they're doing with, you know, I'll go back to what I do for a living is that you talk about 100 million lines of code to make a car that we take for granted. And if you're going to be fully automated, forget it. You know, you're talking about the sensor array capabilities, that technology, that computer in the car, and the car is a rolling computer now. The computer, the functionality of what Google and other things do is brilliant for all what you and I do, right? I think there is phenomenal usages of technology. What kids have access today in terms of technology for research and other things is amazing. Like when I watch him do world history, you know, you just click on a thing and it shows 15 different research things on the Mayan Indians, and you can look at the History Channel. You can do all of it's an amazing thing. What I'm saying is the dark side of that is this algorithm that creates these behaviors in kids that we didn't anticipate happening. I mean, if you watch The Social Dilemma, and I encourage everyone to do it, I really do. There's also that other one, 13 Reasons Why. That's the other one that you don't have.
I won't watch that one. I
refuse. Yeah, I've had to watch both of them. I watch both of them with my kids. They're tough things to watch with your kids, but it's something I think you have to do, but that's just me. But getting back to that is that you look at the people who've created these social media things. One of the telling things is they don't let their kids do social media. They do not let their kids have devices. There are a couple of them that said, no, our kids do not do it because of that being addictive behavior. So the people who've created it realize what started out as this has morphed into this. And I think that as parents, it's just, I don't know about you, I'm exhausted. I wake up exhausted. I go to bed exhausted because my brain hurts all the time because it's this constant trying to work 24 hours a day at home, 24 hours a day to get your kid school, right? And making sure that they're doing the things. But then you're also trying to figure out what the mental health aspects of it is and making sure that they're good and they're socialized. I don't know about you. I'm exhausted all the time. I think it's just like, and I wait for that day. I really do, that we can actually have masks and hug people, right? That's my problem. It's for sure.
Well, that which does not kill us makes us stronger, I guess, both as parents and as working professionals. And someday I think we'll look back and we'll go, wow, we lived through that. But right now we're in the middle of it. It's a very traumatic time for all of us, for the kids and for us as parents. But I want to start to wind down the conversation. This hour is really flying back so fast, Marc. But I want to just start to wind us down in the conversation here today. And if you joined us late, I still want to invite you, please leave a comment below. And even if you're watching this in playback, leave a comment and I'll make sure to share the link with Marc later if you have any questions or contributions about our topic. And we were talking today about computers and the impact on our kids. And I even think about the word computers. I mean, we weren't really talking about computers. We were talking about technology and social media. Yeah. Any final comments for us on this topic, Marc, before we start to wind us down?
I think in fairness, and again, I want to be a both sides of the coin kind of guy, I would sit there, and I don't know if you can put this up, but there's a great article, Dr. Nesi, it's Nesi. The article is The Impact on Social Media on Youth Mental Health. And I think that as every parent, to go in and at least use technology to do some research that you're going to find. Thank you.
Did I get that right? NESI? Did I do that right?
Out of Brown University. And I mean, I just did that. And then the rabbit hole that opened up for me, because again, technology from a research perspective is unbelievable. And I love it. And I think you will find that there is a great deal of work. Pediatricians, we talked to our pediatrician. I'm certain you talked to your pediatrician. They're talking about 2 to 4 hours a day. There you go. 2 to 4 hours a day is what they should be on for social media and electronics technology. When's the last time you've had your son or daughter that was only they couldn't live on 2 to 4 hours, right? The school is 8 hours, let alone, or whatever number it is. But they looked at me, my kids looked at me and laughed when I said, well, we're going to try to get you down to 2 hours. And they thought that, but they'd go to prison. They can get more technology in prison than they could in my house.
Yeah. Well, I just tried to pull it up in the background. I found like a ResearchGate article. I'm not sure if that's the right one, but I'll let our viewers look that up. And if anyone can find a link to that research or that article, feel free to drop it into the chat there. Marc, this was a great conversation here today. And I know we were talking about computers and the impact on our kids, but if people want to learn more about you, I'm going to put up first of all, I'll put up your LinkedIn URL up on screen. Let me just try to put it here. And are you open to accepting invitations from folks that are watching the show here today, or what's your personal point of view there?
I'm absolutely happy to do that, so long as they make sure they put a note in there, right? They have to have an engaging way to message and connect with me, because I learned that from my little Yoda instructor there on the other end above me. I can point like this.
There you go.
You got to have a compelling message for somebody who wants to connect with you.
That's awesome. Yeah, so when you invite Marc to connect, for those folks that are watching this, make sure in your invitation you include a note. Tell Marc that you saw him on the LinkedIn Live with Brenda Meller. Name drop me when they're and maybe something you enjoyed, a point he made or something. Mention that too. Marc, I gotta ask, your LinkedIn header, it's like mesmerizing. I'm trying to figure out what it is. Can you describe for us? Is it an illustration? What are we looking at there?
This is what I do. This is the future of mobility. You look at autonomous aerial. So you have that to the left, that's a vertical lift and takeoff vehicle in there that's going to land on a roof that's going to be fully autonomous so that you can come in from out of town. There is also fully autonomous vehicles. You'll notice there, the street lights are gone. There's also a tram. So really, when you start to look at the next age of mobility, which is where my sweet spot of bringing experts in together, this is what everybody wants. Everybody wants ubiquitous. I don't want to drive technology, right? We all want to just hop in with our smart device, get in and go from point A to point B. And that is, what the automotive and mobility industry is really trying to create. What I'll say is, in the meantime, what we're really trying to do is look at technology that keeps you safe, right? We want to eliminate the 40,000 fatalities every year. Thank you for that shameless plug right there, SAE. You can see. But again, really what we're trying to do is when you get in the car, which you take pretty much for granted like I do, that you get to point A to point B without fatality, with low emissions. And that's what we're trying to do as a society.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you for all the work that you do. And I really did enjoy this conversation. I mean, I know when we talked about, what do we talk about? And I said, let's just pick something that you and I can both have a good conversation about. And I think, it's very topical in terms of, it's weighing on a lot of our minds. So hopefully you've given our viewers something additional to think about. I want to give one more last plug for SAE, if you don't mind, Marc. And I think you gave me this webpage to share. Can you tell people a little bit about, this is the sae.org/attend. So is this upcoming events here?
Yeah, absolutely. Next, in 2 weeks, we have the largest automotive technology conference coming up. There you go. So that's the WCX event. That's my personal responsibility. We have 800 presentations that are on demand. And then we have 58, if you can believe it, 58 sessions going on that are all live. And then we have a series of 9 executive conversations. So the WCX Digital Summit, that was the first event we pivoted to when we went with COVID. So you can imagine an event that's, 10,000 people face to face. When COVID hit, we had to pivot that entirely to digital. And I give a big shout out to those people. We talk about restaurants, rightfully so. We talk about a lot of small businesses, rightfully so. But we really don't think about the people who work in conference centers like TCF, the hotel, because we all go to conferences. We go all to these places. And then all of a sudden, there's hundreds of thousands of people who are now without jobs because of the COVID situation. And we're all now, this fall, we're trying to get back to 100% face-to-face with social distancing practices. But I think—
where are you at? When's your first planned in-person or hybrid event?
I will be in Florida in October. That will be the first face-to-face event. And that's on brake technology, which ironically you absolutely take for granted until you slam on the brakes and need them. And you're like, oh my goodness. And you're like, and there are thousands and thousands of engineers that are working on just that technology alone that is so ubiquitous that we take it for granted. And you're like, oh, wow, I'm so glad that ABS worked. Well, somebody behind the scenes has worked their life to figure out how to get an algorithm and an ABS system to work, and integration with anti-sway systems and all of that, which, again, I give kudos to these folks, that for something that we take for granted every day. Planes, trains, and automobiles, we take them for granted every day, but there are just hundreds of thousands of engineers doing really great work in that area.
Well, thank you to all the folks in that industry that are helping to keep us safe and moving us forward. So you said October in Florida?
Yes, that will be the break event. And then digitally, again, well, up until that point. Again, it's all been on states too. It all will be on vaccination.
Is it planned for a hybrid at this point?
We have,
okay.
yeah, exactly. We have some that are coming in digitally. We'll automatically have digital, but we have a full event planned face to face. And if heaven forbid something happens to where we have to go, we can pivot 100% digital. But
yeah,
we know that we'll be impacted. We'll have a less of a crowd, but we just know the need for business and networking is so critical that there's something about it. Shaking a hand is really, seeing somebody eye to eye is something that, you know, human beings, that's what we do. We're very, very social creatures.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Marc. I really enjoyed the conversation. I want to invite our viewing audience, whether you're watching this live or playback, could you do me a favor? As soon as you're done watching the video, go to the bottom of the video. You're going to see a share link. Click on share right at the bottom, and then share it on LinkedIn. And Marc, you'll know this counts as your post for the day when you do that. Tag Marc in the post. Tell people something that you learned or something that you're reflecting on as you're watching the video. You never know when this is going to help to reach someone in your network and how that message can make a positive impact for them. So Marc, I know it's been over a year since you and I have seen each other. It might be another year until we do see each other in person again. But in the meantime, I look forward to watching your continued progress and activity. And I know you've actually done a lot over the past year since training. You've been one of my superstar students. You've applied. And I even remember, like, I think we did a 2-part training session.
Yeah.
And I'll usually come in the first training session. And I remember, Marc, you were like one of the people who were already pretty well advanced. And I don't know if you thought this or if I could read this in your head, but I was like, he's not sure if he's going to get anything out of this training. Is that a correct assumption? I mean, when I came in, you're like, I already know what I need to know about LinkedIn, right?
Yeah, well, I thought I knew. That's the expression. You don't know what you don't know until somebody tells you don't know it. Thank you very much. And that was absolutely true, is that I thought I'd get a nugget or two out of it. You know, I try to find that because I'm cynical about training, because that's what I do for a living. Because I'm always, I'm always looking at. But for me, what I found was all of the tips and tricks that you gave me to work around and how to just do it better, more effective. Right. How do you take a shared thing that you found from somebody and add your own commentary to it to create that better network? And I think that is one of the things that you gave me real, and making sure when you message somebody with sincerity, right? You're not just sitting there, click, connect with me. You're talking about why it is you need to connect with them. And again, that's that social being, right? I just don't want to be anonymously tagged. I want to know why you want to engage with me. And that's the thing that you taught me, which I really appreciated. And that has helped grow my LinkedIn list of shared people. And to your point, I found a whole bunch of other things. And the whole point of me coming today was to share my story, because I have concern as a parent. And I want other parents to know that they're not alone, that this is, although we're in isolation, we're not alone. And that we need to get out in front of something, because if you don't, it becomes an epidemic. And I think that's what COVID has taught us, is if we don't get out in front of something, something can happen. And that was my hope with sharing my story, was helpful to somebody, that they can start to take a look at behaviors that may help them with their children.
Very good, Marc. Well, pleasant conversation today. I really enjoyed the chat. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your insights with all of us here today.
Well, thank you all for participating.
All right, guys. Well, we're going to start to wrap it up here for today. And I'll just remind you to please leave a comment, even if you're watching this later, because the video will still be shown on the platform. I'll make sure to share the links with Marc later. And if you have any questions for him, we'll make sure and tag him in there. On behalf of all of us here at Meller Marketing, which is myself and Marc, thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day. Be safe and stay healthy out there, everyone. We'll see you on LinkedIn. Take care.